Hello everyone, today we're going to explore how to use the data merge feature on Cryptoworth. This is a feature that you can find on the three-dotted button here under the Transactions tab. Here it's the first option, data merge. This is a feature that you can utilize to override existing data on transaction line items. So I'm going to show you today how to use this feature. Let's go ahead and head to data merge. So here you need to select the source, whether it's a wallet or exchange connection, for example. And once you have your source, you have to import the data merge CSV template that you populate. So here's the template. You can download this template here. Please go ahead and do this. This is the data merge CSV template. You are going to have a internal ID column. Let's expand this a bit so we can see it. Internal ID is the reference unique number that is tied to every single transaction on Cryptoworth. I'll show you when we head back to the platform how to find the reference ID. But in essence, every single transaction line item has a unique identifier that Cryptoworth assigns to the transaction to identify it. That is the key essential data input that you're going to populate the column with for each transaction. Transaction hash, of course you guys know this one, and then type, receive, or send event tag if there is one. Not all transactions have one of Cryptoworth's auto-tagged identifiers. And then the currency code, let's expand this here. So of course the fiat currency that you're reading the transaction in, the cost basis if there is one, the sale price if there is one, and you have the option to add the sale price with markup, a markup number if you need to customize the transaction, the value. Classification ID, this is the unique identifier tied to each classification that you create on Cryptoworth or import from a general ledger. Similar to how the internal reference ID works for transactions, classifications have their own internal reference ID as well. Label, so you can actually set a label and a description for the transaction within the CSV template, so when you import the template, it automatically creates the label and description for that transaction line item. So let's go back to Cryptoworth and start to gather all the information that we need. Alright, so now that we're back on the platform, we want to select transactions that we want to override the data of. So basically the whole purpose of data merging is to override pre-existing data on transactions, whether it's the cost basis, the sale price, adding a markup. There's different reasons why you may want to override existing data. For example, when you run a cost basis algorithm, whether it's FIFO or weighted average cost, we're going to pull the fair market values of digital assets based on the timestamp. Now this data here can be overridden through the data merge feature. So in this example, let's focus on exchange transactions. So let's filter between a specific data set for our CSV. Alright, so we're going to filter out for the transactions that we're interested in for this data merge. So for the sake of this example, what we want to do here is filter. We're going to deselect wallets. For this example, I'm going to use 3 different transactions from Bitstamp. So I'm going to leave my Bitstamp connection here, apply filter, and I'm going to play with 3 different transactions here for the data merge. A send event, a send trade event Ethereum, receive trade event Ethereum, and then a send trade event for Bitcoin. Now there's going to be important data points that you're going to want to use for your data merge CSV template. Now for example, the internal reference ID is one of them. Now when you click the info button, you will see the internal reference ID for each transaction. which is the unique identifier for the transaction in Cryptoworth. The most efficient way to copy and paste every single internal reference ID onto the data merge CSV is by actually exporting the entirety of the transactions that you're going to put into the data merge CSV. So in this case, since I'm only playing with 3 transactions here in this example, I can go ahead and export these transactions via CSV. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and let's jump to the CSV. Okay, so on the CSV export for transactions, you're going to see all the data points related to that transaction, each transaction that you are exporting here. So the data point that we absolutely need for the data merge is the internal reference ID for the transactions. That's in column Y. So we're going to copy all of these IDs and paste them into the internal ID section column of the data merge CSV. Now, of course, you can copy every other data point that you want to keep the same onto the data merge CSV. Otherwise, if it's a cost data point or sale price data point that you know you're going to override, then of course you're going to input a completely different number. Let's go on to the data merge CSV. Alright, so we're back onto the data merge CSV template. Of course, now we added all the fields that we need. So I copy and pasted all the information exactly the same, because the information we're going to override in this example, I just want you to see how I'm going to change it here. So cost basis and sale price, this is really where the big changes tend to happen for these data merges. So let's say for the receive event, instead of having a cost of $14.78, let's say our cost was lower. So let's say our cost basis was just $8.60. And for the sale prices, let's say they were higher. So let's say for the first one, we're at $45, and then the sale price of the next transaction line item, let's say we were at 21.34. And now you can also change the tag. You don't have to have the transaction hash. You could just work with the internal ID. Of course, you can even change the transaction tag, which we know from Cryptoworth we have a tag of trade for each one. We're going to leave it for now. Now another thing you can use here is the classification ID, label, and description. Label and description we can add on to right now. But let's go ahead and find the classification ID of the classification we want to automatically use when we import these this data merge CSV. So let's go back to the platform and gather our classification ID. Alright, so we're back to the platform. Now I want to head straight to accounting, classifications, and I want to use the classification of trade income for the CSV data merge. So all I'm going to use here is just take this number here. This is the internal reference ID. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that and paste it straight on the transaction line item, or more than one line item that I want to use it on. So let's head back to the CSV. Okay, so we're going to paste the classification ID that we copied from the accounting tab. So let's go ahead and place it here. I want to place it on the line item where it says transaction type receive, because I want to indicate that this is my trade income in this example. So let's go ahead and put that there. Now let's go ahead and create labels and descriptions for our transactions that we're merging here, the data that we're merging here. So let's go ahead and create just a label, data merge, let's say data merge for each one, and description test transaction. Let's go ahead and fill these columns. Okay, so now we have a CSV that is ready for the data merge. And let's go ahead and import it. Alright, we're back on the platform. Let's go ahead and click on the data ops menu, data merge. Let's select our source. So in this case, we're using transactions from Bitstamp, and select the CSV. Okay, so let's go ahead and use our file here, import. Alright, so it was successfully imported. So let's go ahead and filter for the Bitstamp transactions. Now let's go to the bottom of this list, is where we have our modified transactions now. Alright, here. So send trade event Ethereum, receive trade event Ethereum, and then send trade event Bitcoin. So we have different values than we originally had. So let's click on info here. So we see a a sell price here of $21.34, and here we see $45 for the sell price, just like we changed. Alright, so let's set up the columns for label and classification so we can see what we modified in the data merge. Let's go ahead and select label and classification. We want to see these columns here. Let's save changes, and let's go down back to our transactions from the data merge template. There we go. Here are the 3 transactions that we modified through the data merge feature. Here we have the labels, and the trade income classification, we used the classification ID of this classification on the CSV template to auto classify the transaction here. And of course we have our modified values, sale price and cost basis. That is how we conclude how to use the data merge feature on Cryptoworth.